Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 40 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to talk about players who are at a fork in the road. So it's a critical final few weeks of the NFL season. How these players perform the rest of the way is going to have a dramatic impact on how we view them in Dynasty moving into the offseason and into 2025. So we've got 5 players at each position lined up, ready to go, including a bonus one at quarterback. So before we jump into that, as always, if you have missed any of our previous shows, you can catch us on any platform of your choice. We're on everything, all the big ones, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, YouTube, you name it, we're there. Go give us a follow on Twitter at Dynasty War Room. You can give us a subscription. That would be helpful on YouTube at the same handle at Dynasty War Room. And if you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, make sure you follow the show. Leave us a 5-star review. We appreciate it. And come back next week again for another episode as we get into the fantasy playoffs. So with all that being said, you guys know the drill. We're just going to jump right into things and kick it off at quarterback, where there's a lot of players that we could discuss, right? I mean, it seems like it's always the case at QB. There's a lot of turnover year to year at the quarterback position. I think a lot more than people tend to realize, in which, we get some overvaluing of quarterbacks, especially in superflex leagues with some of the later stage or unproven quarterbacks that we just assume are going to be good to go for next year. But typically there's always, a couple more quarterback changes than you think. So starting at quarterback, a team that seems like they are headed for a change at the position, and that's the New York Jets with quarterback Aaron Rodgers, 41 years old, and he is very clearly at a fork in the road in terms of his playing career. Obviously, has played for a long time, been a very, very good player, Hall of Famer, but in terms of fantasy and the present here and now, he's only been okay, right? He's helped you a handful of weeks. He's been an okay, QB2 or something like that in Superflex. Certainly not QB1 level, and oftentimes better left on the bench. So the Jets have struggled, and there's been a lot of talk now that Aaron Rodgers either won't be welcome back as the starter, or whether he will return for another season or retire. So a lot of speculation, but it seems like at this moment, there is a, favorable chance that Aaron Rodgers will not be the starting quarterback of the New York Jets next season. And I think a lot of this could come down to how Rodgers and the team play down the stretch. Rodgers, has to finish strong, not just to boost the chances of him returning to New York, but to increase the chances of him even having a starting job next season. We're talking about somebody that's 41, that's causing problems off the field. He can't stay out of the news. He's become more of a distraction. And he's not the same player. He's coming off that Achilles injury, and he doesn't have the same mobility that really made him special on the field. And the end is clearly coming. I think it's just a matter of, is it going to be now or is it going to be one more season? How do things shake out? Big time fork in the road moment for Aaron Rodgers. Now, another guy coming off an Achilles injury that is getting up there in age is Kirk Cousins of the Atlanta Falcons. He's 36 years old, and he's coming off a 4-interception performance that does not inspire a lot of confidence moving forward. He's got his revenge game coming up against Minnesota, and we need to see some things here from Kirk Cousins, right? It's been a rough go. He's had a couple huge weeks earlier on in the season after a pretty slow start. And so we all thought things were fine. Things are not fine. And it's hard to trust Kirk Cousins right now as a QB2 in Dynasty. So, certainly this is somebody in redraft, probably no longer being rostered in most, single QB leagues. So Kirk Cousins, I need to see more. He's at a big moment here because for him, the threat isn't necessarily retirement, although it could be. It's more of, could he lose the job to Michael Penix Jr., who they drafted in the first round? So that's something to pay attention to. Atlanta is fighting for a playoff spot, trying to win the division, trying to sneak in there. And Kirk Cousins is going to have to play better if that's going to happen. So I think this is a huge fork in the road moment for him. And if Atlanta misses the playoffs and Cousins struggles down the stretch, the calls for Michael Penix Jr. are going to get very loud, and it's going to be hard to ignore, despite the contract that Kirk Cousins was handed in the offseason. All right, so now moving on from a couple of the older guys to some young guns. So starting off with Anthony Richardson, 22 years old, which is still extremely young, top 5 pick from the Colts. And, there's been some injury issues. He had the benching earlier this year. Now he's back. He's been playing pretty well in his last couple games since returning as the starter. And this is a really important part of Anthony Richardson's career. He's got, a handful of weeks left. The Colts are pushing for a wild card spot. They're certainly in the mix. And Richardson has the job. He's playing well. And he needs to keep it up. It's as simple as that. He's going to have the opportunity to sort of reestablish his high dynasty value if he can perform, in the last month or two here of the season. So that's what I'm looking for. I want to see him be able to throw the ball effectively, get that completion percentage up, continue to run the ball, score touchdowns, and because he can do it all, right? We've seen the flashes, and that's what made me so high on him at the beginning of the season was, hey, this guy could do it all. This is like potential Josh Allen 2.0 type of material. Hasn't quite turned into that, but we've seen the flashes, and if he can finish the season strong, solidify himself as the starter next season, and give us some hope that that dynasty value can creep back up, closer to where it was at the beginning of the season. I don't know that ever, until we are 100% sure that he is in fact a long-term franchise quarterback, I don't think his value is going to jump up to that, first-round superflex level that it was before this season. He's going to have to really prove himself before that happens. But the talent potential is there. It's a big, big moment here for Richardson to end the season. Another young guy. In fact, our next 2 players here are both young players. In fact, all from, they're all 25 and under. Will Levis, Bryce Young, the next 2 on the list. Will Levis is 25, Bryce Young is 23, and both players have had their ups and downs. Will Levis missed some time due to injury. Bryce Young missed some time due to being benched, very similarly to Richardson. And, Will Levis has, again, had some moments where he's played well. He's had some struggles with turnovers. He has a nice schedule here to end the season. And then Bryce Young has looked atrocious his entire career until, just the last couple of weeks. He's finally starting to put some pieces together. So the big question for both of these players is, will they do enough to be the starting quarterbacks of their teams in 2025? Now, obviously, that's going to have a huge impact on their dynasty value. Will Levis, being a second-round pick, doesn't have quite as much job security as somebody like Bryce Young does, or Anthony Richardson. But, he's played a little bit better than Bryce Young. However, the turnovers have been rough. So, we want to see, can he take care of the ball? Can he, get a win or 2 here down the stretch? And in terms of fantasy, these are some juicy matchups the rest of the way. I'd like to see if he's somebody that you can start. He was somebody that we mentioned a couple episodes ago as somebody who has a really nice playoff schedule. And hey, if you have had some injuries, you're in a pinch, you need to start Will Levis, I think you can do that. So I want to see those good fantasy performances continue. And same thing with Bryce Young. More of what we saw last week against Tampa, which, their defense has struggled, especially in the passing game of late. But if Bryce Young can keep that up and take the next step, that's what we've been waiting to see, because it kind of felt like Bryce Young's value was just dropping. There's no shot he's going to be a franchise quarterback. I think we're starting to see a little bit of those, small flashes that you would have liked to seen earlier, but now you're getting here at this point in the season. So hopefully he can keep that up, and that's why it is a time where he is at a fork in the road in the NFL. All right. So actually, before we move on, I do have one bonus pick here. It'll be 5 players at every other position besides quarterback, but Geno Smith was somebody who I wanted to throw in the mix here. He's 34 years old. And, Seattle's been solid. They're fighting for a wild card spot. They're fighting for a division winner, winning the division, I should say. The NFC West has been a bit of a struggle this year. Arizona, Seattle playing this weekend in a huge game. So Seattle, is in position to be able to make the playoffs. And if that happens, it might be tough to move on from Geno Smith. But in terms of fantasy, in terms of just his production, it's been a little bit underwhelming. He's getting up there in age. Seattle poked around at the QB position in the draft last year and wasn't able to make a move up or decided not to. So that's somebody that I have my eye on. I would like to see, if you're a Geno Smith manager, you want to see him finish the year strong to ensure that he is a starter moving forward as well. So just a bonus name to add to this list. All right. Moving on over to running back. So our 5 names, and they're all relatively younger guys. And, running backs, it's really important to set yourself up, getting that second contract, finishing strong on your rookie deals. And there's a few guys here that are reaching that point, and I'm not really sure how things are going to shake out. So first up is going to be Rachaad White, 25 years old for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Bucky Irving certainly seems like the running back that you would like to have on your roster from the Tampa Bay Bucs. So we'll see how things shape up here the next few weeks. But if Bucky Irving continues to, take over that job and it going from a committee or, a 60-40 type of split to all of a sudden a 75-25, 80-20, like it's just clear that Bucky Irving is the running back that is getting the vast majority of the carries and the receptions in Tampa, that's obviously really bad news for Rachaad White. So he was somebody that we talked about early on in the season as a very kind of obvious sell candidate and, somebody where the writing might have been on the wall due to his inefficiency, taking Bucky Irving in the draft. And I obviously feel the same way. I just don't think this is going to end well for him. So, if you can still move him, depending on your league's trade deadline, most leagues have probably passed their deadline by now, but I know week 14 of the end of these games is often a deadline as well. So see what you can get, because once this offseason comes, it's going to be, the value is just going to continue to drop. So, keep that in mind with Rachaad White, but that is why he is at a fork in the road. Javonte Smith, that he doesn't exist. Javonte Williams does, however, and the Denver Broncos running back at year 24 for him, 24 years old, a little all over the place here. I'm trying something new here with my show notes, so we'll see, if I like it or not. But Javonte Williams has seen his role decrease, seemingly week by week with Denver. They really kind of play the hot hand, and it makes it really difficult for a fantasy manager to predict who you should play, from that backfield. So Williams has been all right. He's had an okay season. You've been able to play him at, for portions of the season, but didn't look good last week, starting to lose more of the carries, and it's important for him here to finish out the year strong because pretty good chance he's not back in Denver. He's going to end up somewhere else, and because I believe he's a free agent. So, he's got to finish strong to get that second contract, or he's going to end up as, a backup, somebody that you mix in a committee where he's clearly the number 2. So it's kind of a tough spot right now for him, but very obviously a fork in the road. Chuba Hubbard, 25 years old, Carolina Panthers running back, is somebody that has had a really good season. Been a really nice surprise. He's been startable almost every single week, and he got a big contract extension. But they did, draft his what was thought to be his replacement in Jonathan Brooks, who's missed most of the season. He came back a couple weeks ago, and he finally got a handful of carries last week, a bit more than the first week where he wasn't doing much. And I don't know how things are going to look for Chuba Hubbard down the stretch here. They're not going to make the playoffs. They have some incentive to, see what they have in Jonathan Brooks, get him acclimated to the NFL after the injury and missing so much time. And I don't know what that means for Chuba Hubbard. So he's been very good. You obviously hope that you can keep playing him if you've, done so for most of the season. But this is a big, end of the season for him, because I think moving forward, the question is going to be, is this going to be just a timeshare where starting either player is going to be difficult, or is there going to be one guy that is clearly the one to play? And, Hubbard has the contract, Brooks has the draft capital. Who's it going to be? We should learn a lot, over the next month. And so that's why he is at a fork in the road. All right, and finally we have a pair of Pittsburgh Steelers running backs, both 26 years old, Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren, and free agency is coming up for Harris, and I think it is for Warren as well, but I'm confident that it is for Harris, and I don't really know what's going to happen, because it seems like Harris is probably headed elsewhere. He was not given the 5th year of his rookie deal from the Steelers, which usually is a sign that, you're headed somewhere else. But the running back position can be a little bit tough in terms of contracts, and so that doesn't necessarily mean that he's gone. He's had a pretty solid season. Pittsburgh has had a good, a very good 2024 with Russell Wilson, and, he's certainly done enough to earn a contract. I think the question is, will he be re-signed? Will he go somewhere else? And is he somebody that, is going to get a big money starting running back type of deal, or is he going to be more of a committee back? And I think how he finishes the season will go a long way in determining that. So he's got a tough schedule. Same thing, Jaylen Warren. It's like, okay, is this a guy that is purely a pass catcher, change of pace, RB2 handcuff? Or is he going to be somebody that you can start at the same time as Najee Harris? And I just, I do have Jaylen Warren in, I think, one league, and I have to start him right now simply because the way the injuries have destroyed my team. And I don't feel good about it. I would rather not. And I think that's kind of how most people feel about him right now if he's on your roster. You're in a much better position if you can just leave him on your bench. So I'd like to see something from him, here the rest of the way. What kind of player is he? Is he somebody that we really need to discuss in terms of fantasy football relevance moving forward? Or, what are we talking about here, right? It's just a matter of, is he just a guy, or does he have true fantasy value? And the next month of the season should go a long way there. All right. Now, you've probably noticed, and it's much better today than it has been in previous shows, but my voice has been, I've been losing it a little bit. So, unfortunately, it sounds like I might need my tonsils removed at some point soon. So hopefully that'll be a few months away, but, I'll of course have to miss a few weeks of shows for that, but just one of those things, man, getting older. So we'll keep you posted on that, but that's certainly not a concern in the, the short term. But if you hear me, clearing my throat or taking a second here to regroup, it's because that throat's giving me some problems. So moving on to running back and the wide receivers, Tank Dell, first up on the list, 25 years old. And everyone thought that he was going to be this hot shot slot receiver, number 2 on an elite offense. Then they went out and got Stephon Diggs. Nico Collins is still clearly the number 1. And it's been a pretty big disappointment for Tank Dell this year, even following Stephon Diggs' injury. So I'm concerned. I think he's just more of a run-of-the-mill, well, not run-of-the-mill, but he's an above-average slot receiver and, clearly kind of the number 3 guy in the passing attack if Diggs were to come back. So, he's had his chances here. He's a talented electric player. I just don't know that he's somebody that you can consistently start in your lineups and feel good about it, right? I think you feel best if he's somebody that you can choose when you want to flex him. You don't want to feel like you need to start him. So, the value has definitely dropped throughout the season. But it's an important part of the season here because, again, this is where players remember who shows up in the fantasy playoffs. So over these next handful of weeks, everybody's going to be, paying really close attention, focusing on these players that help them out, win them titles, or who lets them down. And so Tank Dell's somebody that, could go either way, that we'll definitely have an eye on. Next up is going to be Deebo Samuel, 28 years old, and his stock has certainly dropped. No Brandon Ayuk, and yet he's just failed to really make an impact. George Kittle has, been great, but Deebo's not even the receiver you want to own right now. It's Juwan Jennings has been better in San Francisco. So, I don't see it with Deebo. I think the time is coming where it's, you're nearing the end of his true, elite level fantasy value. And I think the warning signs were there. We probably knew this. He was somebody I was steering clear of. I don't think I have him on any rosters anywhere. I have a lot of leagues, and he's just one of those guys that I steered away from. I think we had a few shows in the offseason where he made lists of players to stay away from, trade away, decreasing value, things like that. And I think that's, if he wants to get away from that, now is the time to make a move and, show us that he still has some gas left in the tank. Now, somebody that's playing for, a huge free agent contract is going to be T. Higgins. So he's next up on the list in terms of players at a fork in the road. And 25 years old, he's been awesome, when he's on the field. There's still those injury concerns. He misses time, and it's frustrating. However, when he does play, when he is on the field, he's unbelievably talented, and I think it's going to land him a massive free agent contract. I think, the dream destination for me is probably the Chargers with Justin Herbert. I think that would be a great pairing. I've seen that, floated on social media this week, but we'll see what happens, and he could certainly return to Cincinnati if they can figure things out. And that offense has been great for fantasy between Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and Chase Brown. So fork in the road for him, because if he finishes as strong as he's, been, it's going to be huge for Higgins managers. It's going to be huge for Higgins himself in terms of his contract. And, I think that's what everyone would like to see for fantasy. So T. Higgins, third receiver on the list. All right, now we're going to go to two other younger players that have, not been performing all that well. So Quentin Johnston, 23 years old for the Chargers, and then Christian Watson, 25 years old for the Green Bay Packers, who played tonight. So we're recording this Thursday night. It'll come out. You're probably listening to this on Friday. But Quentin Johnston, we had that huge drop, on national TV. We all saw that where it would have been a huge moment in the game for LA, and couldn't come down with it, kind of reminiscent of his rookie season. Now, in fairness, he's been much better in his second year, but, whether he's going to be somebody that they can count on and, whether he remains a key part of that wide receiver core is a huge question. So the end of the year, very, very important for him, especially with Ladd McConkey a little bit banged up. So keep an eye on Johnston. Is he able to bounce back, or is he just somebody that, has some moments, but he's just, a first-round bust, essentially? Christian Watson, however, early second-round pick by Green Bay. He is a true boomer bust, big play, or nothing type of guy. And, paired with Jordan Love, it's a fun combo. He was a player that I was really, really excited about in the offseason. Just hasn't really put it together despite staying, mostly healthy. And this is an important part of the season for him. Which way is he going to go? Is he going to be somebody that, Green Bay, who is a playoff team, a, team that's trying to win a division and catch up to Detroit? And, we'll learn a lot in this Thursday night game. But he's, this is a good team, good offense. Jordan Love is certainly somebody that can hit Christian Watson on those, deep passes. but he's just got to do more. We just need more volume. So I'm really looking to see if he can get some of that volume. Romeo Doubs banged up. So can he do that? Or are we nearing the end of the Christian Watson experience, which has really been more of an experiment? So, big question mark, lots of eyes on Christian Watson here the rest of the way because he is at a big fork in the road in his career. All right, tight ends. Final segment here, we got 5 names. And first up is going to be Kyle Pitts, age 24. And he has been one of the most frustrating players in fantasy football since he came into the league. Now, if you are a Kyle Pitts manager, you know exactly what I'm talking about because you never know when you can play him. He has these big games. Then he has some of these, he's, looking great and he's feeling healthy and all these things. And he shows you the flashes. And he just isn't consistent. You just don't know what you're going to get with Kyle Pitts. He almost kind of reminds me of like a Jameis Winston version of a tight end where he can be really awesome or really terrible. And we saw that, he had a goose last week, no points. And, but he's had some really good weeks too. So he needs to find some consistency the rest of the way. It kind of goes a bit with Kirk Cousins, obviously, and him needing to be consistent here the rest of the way. But I want more from Kyle Pitts, and I think everyone that has him on their team does as well. So he certainly makes this list as a player that, his dynasty value is going to be very much affected by how he finishes out the season. Next up is going to be Cade Otton, 25 years old from Tampa Bay, and he's had a really, really good season. He's been awesome, especially if you've been somebody in a tight end premium league. He's had some monster weeks. Baker Mayfield has been great. The Tampa offense, without Godwin and without Mike Evans for a good portion of the season, Otton has stepped up and done well. But he's had a couple of down weeks here. Mike Evans is back now. I think that Cade Otton is at a fork in the road. This is where we see whether or not he just reverts back to being a replacement level, B-list tight end that mostly rides your bench and you start him on bye weeks and, or when there's some injuries and things like that. Or is he a top 12, top 10 tight end that you can start every single week moving forward? He's young enough. He's had production so far this year, but we need to see it be consistent here the rest of the way, or does he fade and kind of revert back? So that's what I'm watching for with him and makes him the tight end number 2 on this list. Next up is going to be Dalton Kincaid, another 25-year-old first-round pick by the Buffalo Bills. And he's, had some ups and downs, a little bit banged up here and there, but we expected a lot more from Dalton Kincaid. He was somebody that we thought, and pretty much everyone, the consensus belief was that he was going to be a top 5, top 6 tight end, and it just has not been the case. He's been, underwhelming. He hasn't had those big games, and, on a Buffalo offense with Josh Allen that's, been really performing well, we thought that there might be something. And instead it's been Khalil Shakir, who I have really loved all throughout the season. If you've listened to this show for a long time, you know that I've been, right at the front of that Khalil Shakir bandwagon. So Dalton Kincaid, we need you. It can't just be Shakir. Ken Coleman's been hurt. Amari Cooper, who they acquired in a trade, hasn't really done a whole lot in Buffalo. So it's been James Cook and, Khalil Shakir, and that's really it in terms of the weapons that you want to start in fantasy. So Dalton Kincaid, we need to see something here the rest of the way. Kind of similar to Cade Otton. Are you, a star tight end, a top 10 start every week type of player? Or are you, in that, mid-teens, 10 to 20 type of range, a backup in most, most leagues? I don't know. We'll see. So he's the next tight end on the list. Next up, we got 2 players that are a little bit more, they're veterans, been around a little bit longer. And we'll start with Will Dissly, 28 years old, with the Chargers. And, he's had some really nice moments. We weren't sure who was going to be the full-time tight end for the Chargers coming into the year. Seemed like it might be Hayden Hurst. Will Dissly has taken over that role, especially over the last month or two, and he's been pretty good. But we need to see consistency throughout the rest of the year. Establish himself as the starter moving forward. Will he be back in LA? And we saw the dud last week, and we need that to change. We need that to go back to that month of really good production, and we'll see what kind of player we get here the rest of the season. And especially, again, same thing like with Quentin Johnson, where you just need to see something. Will Dissly has an opportunity with McConkey banged up, Johnston struggling. The door is open for Dissly to kind of really take advantage like we've seen. We just need that to be consistent the rest of the way so we know moving forward he's somebody we can count on, and he's not just kind of a 1-year wonder, plug in and be happy that you had him stashed on your bench type of guy. And last but not least, Pat Freiermuth, Pittsburgh Steelers tight end, 26 years old. He is somebody that I have been a big fan of. I have him on a number of teams, and he had a really nice start to his career, and then instead of kind of building into an elite tight end, he's just sort of plateaued. He's always been solid, good but never great. So I want to see, if that will change. That's his fork in the road. Does he just maintain his status as, your sort of ideal backup tight end that you start on bye weeks, and or if you're looking for just a low end starter, that's your guy? Or can he, take the next step? Can he be a top 12 dude? I don't know. I think he's still going to have value regardless, but I think it's sort of a situation where if he can't put it all the way together the rest of the season, is, the ceiling capped? Is it gone? Is there no more hope for, this elite tight end? It's just, he's an okay guy. So we'll see how things shake out, but, he had a good week. He's, shown a pretty good connection with Russell Wilson, and, we'll see how that all plays out. But that is my list here. So we'll quickly run through the players at each position here. So players at a fork in the road at quarterback. I went with Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, Bryce Young, and Geno Smith. At running back, we have Rachaad White, Javonte Williams, Chuba Hubbard, Najee Harris, and Jaylen Warren. At wide receiver, we have Tank Dell, Deebo Samuel, T. Higgins, Quentin Johnston, and Christian Watson. And at tight end, we have Kyle Pitts, Cade Otton, Dalton Kincaid, Will Dissly, and Pat Freiermuth. So there you have it. Thanks for tuning in this week. Sorry for no episode last week. Was Thanksgiving. Things just got a little bit crazy. Didn't want to force an episode when I didn't really have, anything to bring to the table. So hopefully this one, I try to do my shows where they have some value, for at least the whole next week. I don't typically like doing, start sit kind of stuff where you got to listen before the games. So if you catch this episode on Friday, awesome. If you don't get to it until Monday or Tuesday or sometime next week, that's still fine. That's how I do this. I want the shows to have a little bit longer shelf life in case you can't, get to everything the day it comes out. So thank you all for tuning in, making it this far. And if you are still listening, we did have our Spotify Wrapped just come out. So as a creator, I got one for the first time, and very cool to see. There are some of you that listen to every show, stick around to the very end. I was the number one. The Dynasty War Room was the number one show for a handful of you. So thank you so much for tuning in. It really means a lot. It's really cool to see. And I'm excited to, keep this show going and launch things, moving forward here with the end of the year in the playoffs and the offseason, and dive into rookies, which I really think is, where I can make the biggest impact, with your Dynasty teams as we prep for rookie season and the drafts, which are, of course, one of the most fun, times of year in Dynasty Fantasy Football. So thank you all again, and we will talk to you all next week.